They say blood is thicker than water. But no one tells you what happens when the blood turns to poison. No one tells you that the ones closest to your heart are also closest to your throat. I was born into a house where family was more chant than choice. A word whispered like a lullaby. A weapon disguised in warmth. My mother was the kind of woman who wore sacrifice like a perfume, always sighing as she scrubbed the walls, telling us how much she'd given up to raise us. We owed her, even when she never said it outright. It dripped from every word. And my sister, we shared the same womb, but never the same warmth. She always looked at me like I was wearing something that belonged to her. Jealousy is silent until it finds a stage. And mine found one in the man I loved. He came into my life like spring. Soft hands, easy smile, ambitions lined in gold. I worked hard to build that love. It didn't just bloom on its own. Late nights, long talks, building trust like it was a temple. I thought introducing him to my family would be the next natural step. It was the first domino. The first blind step into a silent war I didn't know I was in. They didn't see the man. They saw the house behind him, the status, the way he spoke about investments, the way he paid for things without blinking. They saw opportunity, not love. The shift was slow, almost beautiful in how quiet it was. My mother stopped calling me for help. At first, I thought it was healing, that maybe she'd found stability. I smiled at her independence. Little did I know, it wasn't independence. It was a redirection. She had gone around me, directly to him. Payments, bills, small emergencies. And he, eager to impress, to belong, obliged. I didn't know then. Not until the whispers grew legs. Not until I found receipts with his name on debts that weren't mine. Not until I walked into the house one day and saw my sister sitting too close, laughing too softly, wearing lipstick she never wore. I didn't scream. There was no confrontation, just silence. I watched them, like strangers in my own dream, like something had peeled the skin off my reality and shown me the rot beneath. And still, they smiled at me. My mother offered me tea. My sister asked if I was tired. And he touched my shoulder and said, "You're imagining things." That was the day my heart stopped trying to understand. Betrayal doesn't always come with blood and screaming. Sometimes it comes with quiet dinners and I love yous. Sometimes it comes from the womb that birthed you. And I realized then, they weren't sorry. They weren't confused. They weren't naive. They were wolves. And I had been feeding them, loving them, trusting them with my back turned. I didn't cry. I didn't fight. I left that night with only my silence. But in that silence, a seed was planted. Not of revenge. Not yet. But of distance. Of calculation. Of the slow, cold gathering of my power. They took something from me. So now, I would take something back. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my car outside the house that still had my name on the mailbox, watching the windows flicker with warmth. Inside, my mother was laughing. My sister was sipping tea. And he was probably pouring wine for the woman I used to tuck in at night. The house looked alive. But I had died in it. I wasn't just betrayed. I was replaced. Not gradually. Not with remorse. But with precision, as if I were a blueprint they studied and rewrote. He knew what I liked, what I sacrificed, how I carried my family like luggage through storms and rent due dates. And now he was paying for my mother's medicine, covering my sister's rent, becoming their provider, not as a gesture of love for me, but as a transaction of loyalty to them. And I saw it, too clearly, the plan that was never spoken but always felt. My family didn't want to share my happiness. They wanted to steal it. Because to them, my joy wasn't a legacy, it was leverage. One day, I checked my mother's phone when she left it unlocked. I wasn't proud, but pride is a luxury when the world starts pulling at your ribs. There it was, thread after thread of her texting him directly, begging, flattering, asking for things that were never hers to request. "You know I raised her," she'd written once. "She owes me everything." Everything. That's what I had been reduced to. A bridge. A transaction. A passport out of struggle. And worse, he answered. He helped. No hesitation. I wondered what lies he was telling himself. That he was being generous? That he was helping my family behind my back for my sake? But I knew better. Men like him don't give. They trade. And my mother. Oh, she was always excellent at striking silent deals. The day it all shattered was uneventful on the surface. I came home early. A missed appointment. A broken train schedule. And there she was. My sister. In his arms. Not in a moment of passion, no. That would have been almost easier. She was laughing. He was feeding her a bite of something. Casual. Domestic. As if this had been going on for years. I stood in the doorway. The key still in my hand. Neither of them noticed. That was the worst part. When they finally saw me, no one screamed. No one cried. Just silence. And the faint sound of the kettle boiling in the background. My mother entered the room a moment later. Saw my face. Sensed the silence. And all she said was, "These things happen. These things happen. Like spilling milk. Like missing a bus. Like your own daughter being betrayed by her own blood and the man she trusted." That was the moment something inside me broke. But not the way they expected. Not shattered. Not soft. No. Something inside me shifted. Cold. Clean. Exact. I didn't confront him. Didn't beg for truth. Didn't demand apologies. I left that same night. Packed what I needed. Deleted their numbers. Blocked their accounts. But I didn't disappear. I watched. Silently. Strategically. The way predators do when they've just been wounded. Because I knew something they didn't. I was no longer trying to be loved. I was done trying to be understood. Now I was studying the pattern of how people take. And soon, I would learn how to take everything back. You don't scream when the knife goes in. Not when it's carved from the same love you once kissed goodnight. Not when it's held by the very hands that braided your hair. That once whispered, "You're my everything." No. You go still. You learn to bleed without sound. And that's what I did. I disappeared quietly. No loud exit. No broken dishes. Just the rustling of plastic bags and the slow turn of a door handle. They didn't even chase me. Why would they? The prize was already in their hands. The city looked different through betrayal. Everything louder. Colder. More expensive. I rented a studio apartment in a district they wouldn't be caught dead in. Peeling paint. Flickering lights. It suited me. No one asked questions there. Not even when I cried into my laundry at 2 a.m. Not even when I walked in with bloodshot eyes and trembling hands. It was the perfect place to become a ghost. But ghosts remember. And ghosts, they learn how to haunt. I got a new job. Something small. Administrative. Forgettable. Perfect. Because in that forgettable space, I rebuilt my walls. Stronger this time. Colder. I sharpened my smile. Polished my silence. And learned how to be invisible in rooms full of men with loud suits and louder egos. I watched. Listened. Waited. For what? I wasn't sure yet. But I knew revenge was a patient thing. And I had time. I never spoke their names again. Not at work. Not in passing. Not even in prayer. Because they didn't deserve the breath it took to remember them. My mother. My sister. My ex. To the world, they still looked like people. To me, they were shadows. And I was learning how to step out of them. One night, months later, I saw them again. Not in person. Online. A photo. My sister, dressed in a luxury coat she could never afford, standing beside him. Not beside my ex, no. Beside another man. A caption beneath the image said, "New beginnings." And just like that, the knife they used on me? She used it on him. I wanted to laugh. But I didn't. Because I knew something deeper now. They eat their own. My mother raised us on manipulation like it was scripture. My sister drank it like water. And him? He walked into our family like a fool at a feast, not knowing he was the dish. I kept watching. Not to pity. Not even to gloat. I watched to learn. Because someday, when they were weak enough, desperate enough, hungry enough, I'd be there.
Not to save them,
But to let them starve on the silence they once fed me. I never told anyone the full truth. Because who would believe it? That a mother could sell her daughter's love life for rent money. That a sister could slide into her sister's bed with a smile and call it destiny. That I once thought love was enough to protect me. No, people like clean stories. Stories with villains and heroes. But I lived in the gray. And that's where my revenge was born. The silence became my strategy. I didn't post.
didn't party,
Didn't cry publicly. I became what they hated most. Unreachable. I built a life they couldn't track. Not through gossip, not through pity, not through my kindness. I gave nothing. Because they had already taken everything. And then opportunity came knocking. Not loudly. It came in the form of an investor I met through work. A woman, fierce and quiet like me. We didn't exchange sob stories. We exchanged strategies. Within 2 years, I'd saved enough to quit my job. I started something small. A consultancy. I offered structure to people who had ideas but no order. Order was my new oxygen. When the money came in, I didn't splurge. I invested. Doubled. Then tripled. I built my house brick by brick. Not just the home I lived in, but the inner fortress I kept hidden. And one day, the day I opened the doors to my first private office, the phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. And on the other end was her voice. "Hi," she said, like we were still 17. Like nothing had happened. My sister. She wanted a loan. Something about a failed business, a bad breakup, and our mother needing help. I said nothing. Just listened. And when she was done, I replied with only 3 words. I don't recall.
click.
They tried again weeks later. Through a cousin. Then an old neighbor. The whispers came back around. She's rich now. She married up. She changed.
No.
I didn't change. I remembered. And that memory? That was my weapon. There's something beautiful about being the storm that no one sees coming. I wasn't loud. I didn't drag them. I simply became the woman they thought only existed in their dreams. And then locked the gates. Revenge doesn't always scream. Sometimes it smiles. A polite smile at a gala where my name echoed louder than theirs ever could. A calm smile when reporters mentioned self-made and resilience in the same breath. A distant smile when I passed the street where I used to cry and didn't feel a thing.
I didn't need to destroy them. They were already doing that to themselves.
All I had to do was live. Louder.
Richer.
Wiser. But let me not lie to you. There were nights I stared at the ceiling, grinding my teeth against old memories. I had scars that no amount of lotion or success could smooth over. I had questions that haunted me in sleep. Why me? Why did they do it smiling? Why did love fail? I never got the answers.
But I stopped needing them.
Because the girl who once needed answers
Was gone.
They say healing is soft. Mine wasn't. Mine was sharp, steel-forged, threaded with silence, and stitched with fire. I let go of softness to become something else. Not hard. Not cruel. Unbreakable. Years later, I stood at a conference podium. Spotlights above, cameras flashing, and saw her in the back row. My mother. Face sunken. Hair graying. Eyes that darted down when I met them. No words were exchanged. None needed. She knew. She knew she had birthed gold and sold it for coins. She knew the silence I wrapped around her now was colder than any slap. She knew I had won. Not in noise, but in absence. Revenge isn't about pain. It's about presence. About walking into rooms they swore you'd never survive. Wearing joy like a weapon. And refusing, utterly refusing, to make space for those who tried to bury you. I was never loud about what they did, but I was louder in who I became. And when people ask about my past, I say only this. They taught me how to disappear. So I taught myself how to rise. People talk about rising like it's romantic.
But there was nothing soft about my climb. I rose alone, in silence, step by bruised step. No one was cheering. No one handed me a rope. Every foothold I found, I bled for, and I never looked back, because behind me was betrayal dressed as family, and ahead was mine. In the mornings, I woke before the sun, made coffee strong enough to silence the grief, read books like scriptures about building, selling, winning. I built my business with a laptop on a second-hand desk. Every client I served, I studied. Every success, I logged. Every lesson I burned into my bones. No one saw the work. They only saw the results. That's the lie of success. It's always lonelier than it looks. I didn't date. I didn't trust. The idea of intimacy was repulsive. Too close. Too dangerous. I had already seen how love could become a weapon. I refused to hand over my heart again, not until I could hold it in both hands without shaking. My mother tried to call again once. Left a voicemail. "You've changed." Yes, I had. From ash to obsidian. I deleted it, then blocked the number again. The loneliest part wasn't the silence. It was the flashbacks. The days I remembered laughter in the kitchen. My sister sneaking food from my plate. My mother humming gospel songs while ironing my school blouse. Were they all fake? Or had I just been the fool at the center of their stage? It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the next step. Always the next step. Even when it hurt. Even when I cried alone in the shower. Even when I questioned why, I kept going. I kept going. Because the only person I had left was me. And she was worth saving. I became obsessed with control. Control over my time.
My space. My emotions. I didn't cry in public. I didn't ask for help. I didn't let anyone hold the door open for me. Kindness felt like a setup. So I built walls higher than memory, thicker than guilt, and colder than the silence my mother left behind. But somewhere along the 7th year of solitude, I stumbled, not down, but into someone. He wasn't grand or flashy. He didn't own a title or carry charm like a weapon. He was quiet,
Present.
and he didn't ask to fix me. He just listened. And in his silence, I didn't feel judged. I felt possible. I hated that. I hated that I liked him. That I smiled when I saw his messages. That I softened when I heard his voice. I tried to run, but he didn't chase. He just said, "I'll be here if you ever stop fighting ghosts." And then, he waited. That scared me more than betrayal ever did. Because, what if I failed again? What if love came? And this time it was real. And I ruined it? What if I let him see the scarred woman behind the empire? What if I was still broken? But what scared me more
Was dying with walls still around me.
So, for the first time in a decade, I opened the door. Not wide, just a crack. But it was enough for light to get in. I told him everything. And he didn't flinch, didn't recoil, didn't give me pity or polished words. He just said, "You didn't deserve any of it. But you deserve everything next." I didn't believe him at first. But I wanted to. So I let him stay. Not because I needed saving, but because for the first time in years, I didn't want to rise alone. People think healing looks like light, but sometimes it looks like fury, precision, discipline so sharp it cuts through the past. I didn't heal by forgiving them. I healed by outgrowing the version of myself who ever needed them. That version. The one who begged to be seen, who gave too much, who waited at doorways that would never open.
She's dead now.
I buried her quietly. No grave. No mourning. Just a vow over her bones. Never again. While they spiraled in their chaos, I built a kingdom out of silence. My business became my spine. Each decision, a vertebra clicking into place. I stopped explaining. Stopped apologizing for my ambition. I was no longer building for approval. I was building for freedom. And the man who had waited, he watched me evolve with the kind of respect most men reserve for kings. He didn't interrupt. He didn't shrink. He stood beside me. Not ahead. Not behind. We walked together. Two souls who had both been scorched, but chose not to burn others in return. The night I said yes to marrying him, it wasn't out of romance. It was out of clarity, because I finally knew what it meant to be loved, without being owned. Still, I never told him everything. Some wounds don't need an audience. Some names don't deserve resurrection. My mother, my sister, they became shadows behind a locked door in my mind. Sometimes I'd pass that door. Sometimes the memory would rattle the handle. But I never opened it. Not until one day. I heard their names again. From a journalist. An email, actually. Subject line: "Are you related to Mira and Elira?" I didn't respond, but I read every word. Apparently, my sister had vanished. Abandoned her child. Left debts. Left fire. My mother had been exposed in a financial scheme, misusing funds she once claimed were for the church. And suddenly, everyone remembered me. The forgotten daughter. The one who disappeared. Now they wanted interviews. Opinions. A comment. I gave them nothing. Because silence is stronger than scandal. Because I owed no one my side of the story. Because the only justice I wanted was this: to be so successful, so healed, so far beyond them, that their names would shrink inside my silence. The revenge was simple. I erased them. From my lips. From my legacy. From every chapter one now write. And when I tucked my children in at night, I smiled knowing this. They would never know those women. They would never hear the poison that raised me. They would grow up in a home where love was not a trap, where silence was peace, and where fire did not consume, it forged. You know what no one tells you? That silence has gravity. It pulls the guilty back to you, not because they care, but because they fear what you've become without them. I never reached out to them. Not once. Not when I moved cities. Not when I married. Not when my business crossed its first million. I let them rot in the echo of what they did. But one day I saw her. My mother. In a place I didn't expect. A conference for women in leadership of all things. She was sitting in the back row. Not as a guest, but as a cleaner, wiping chairs, folding pamphlets, keeping her head low. I was the keynote speaker. And for a second, my breath caught on the past. But I didn't flinch. I walked on stage, in heels taller than the hopes she tried to crush, in a dress the color of rebirth, not white, but red. Red like rage. Red like fire that doesn't consume, only illuminates. When I spoke, I didn't mention names, but every word was for her. Some of us rise not because we were supported, but because we were betrayed. We built empires from the ashes they left us in. And that, my sisters, is a power they'll never understand. The applause thundered like justice. And when it ended, I walked off stage, straight past her. Her eyes were wet. Her lips tried to form a word. But I kept walking, because no apology born from convenience can undo a betrayal born from choice. She chose. And so did I. 2 weeks later, she appeared too. My sister, Elira. Except she didn't walk. She strutted in, like life hadn't peeled her down to the bone. We crossed paths at a gallery. Not just any gallery, mine. I was showcasing the portraits of women who had survived betrayal, who had turned grief into greatness. Their eyes were on fire. Their mouths closed like locked doors. Their posture, divine. Elira stepped in like she owned the floor. Her hair had thinned. Her face, still beautiful, but cracked, like porcelain left in the sun too long. And when our eyes met, she smiled. A smile that dared to pretend. "Hi," she said, like nothing had ever burned. I didn't smile back. She wandered through the gallery and stopped at the largest painting. A woman in a red dress, standing on a mountain of broken glass. The caption read, "She bled quietly until her silence became armor." My sister stood frozen. And then, tears. Real ones. But I didn't move. Not toward her. Not away. I let her drown in the realization. that I had not only survived, I had built something sacred.
From the shards they left me with,
She whispered, I didn't know it would cost this much. I looked at her, finally, and I said, You didn't care what it cost me. That was it. She tried to cry louder, to explain, to blame our mother, to rewind history with guilt. But I left. Because some stories don't deserve a sequel. Some scars deserve to stay closed. Revenge is not always loud. Sometimes, it arrives like a storm cloud in silk gloves. I didn't take back what they stole. I built more than they ever imagined. And then, I made sure they saw it. All of it. The magazine covers. The award ceremonies. The foundation I created to protect daughters from mothers like mine. I named it after myself. Not out of pride, but reclamation. My name. My legacy.
mine.
One day, a journalist called me. They were running a story on families torn apart by greed. They asked if I would like to give my side. I declined. But I gave them documents. Proof of money transfers, recorded messages, bank slips tied to my ex, all signed by my mother and sister. The article went viral. I didn't attach my name. I didn't have to. They recognized themselves. In the darkness. I heard my sister lost her job. I heard my mother was asked to leave the church. I heard the same people they impressed with their lies now cross the street to avoid them. And me? I never spoke publicly. My silence was the headline. My success, the scream they could never silence. Because in the end, I didn't need to destroy them. I just needed to live. So loudly, so freely, so truthfully, that they felt every breath of mine. As a blade they once held, turned against them. I didn't come back with a crown. I didn't need one. I came back with blueprints, bricks, and a name carved from ash. The house I built wasn't made of stone. It was made of silence, of sleepless nights, of prayers muttered through clenched teeth, of the screams I swallowed so no one would hear me shatter. I built it with my bare hands, trembling, blistered, reborn. At first, it was just a rented room in a city where no one knew my name. No ghosts, no memories, no backstabbing footsteps behind my door. Then came a job. Then came a dream. Then came walls, real ones, rising up like a monument to survival. I worked until my knuckles split open.
Until my eyes learned how to stay dry.
Until the part of me that wanted them to say sorry
Died.
and, in its place, a woman who no longer needed permission to exist. I built a business with nothing but instinct and desperation. A healing center. For girls like me. For women who had been silenced.
Used.
Buried by the people who claimed to love them. I didn't put my face on the ads. I didn't give interviews. But people came. They found safety in the walls I built. Because they could feel it was born of pain, not pity. And every brick, every beam, every open doorway was a reminder. I didn't survive to prove a point. I survived to build. And they, the ones who thought they broke me, they were never part of the blueprint. The first time I held the keys to the building, my fingers shook. Not from fear, from disbelief. This wasn't just a door. It was a threshold I had never crossed before. One I'd only dreamed of through tears and broken promises. It was mine. And I didn't need my mother's permission. I didn't need my sister's applause. I didn't need a man's name beside mine to make it real. For the first time, everything I touched was built with clean hands and a clean heart. There were photos on the wall not of family, but of survivors. Girls who rebuilt their lives from nothing. Women who whispered their pain and learned to scream their freedom. I kept the walls white,
Bright.
peaceful, because the shadows didn't deserve to live here anymore. There was a garden on the rooftop. Wildflowers in every shade of defiance. I watered them at sunrise. And sometimes I'd stand barefoot on the concrete, letting the early morning sun kiss the same skin. They once bruised with betrayal. I was healing.
Not in a straight line.
But in circles. Tight, slow, ever widening. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone.
It was about honoring the girl I used to be, the one who slept with tears in her ears and prayed to disappear.
She didn't disappear.
She became me,
They found me again.
not in rage, not in shame, but in curiosity. Like moths drawn to the light I refused to dim. It was my mother first. She didn't knock. She came during an event, dressed modestly, acting like she belonged. But I saw her. I always see her. She stood in the back, eyes wandering, mouth tight, fingers wringing the handle of her old leather bag. The one I once bought her with my first salary.
She didn't speak.
Didn't approach. Didn't clap. Just watched. Watched me speak life into a room full of women who looked nothing like her, but carried the same wounds she helped carve into me. She didn't recognize me. Not really. I wasn't the daughter she remembered. I wasn't begging. I wasn't apologizing. I wasn't small anymore. I never acknowledged her. Not with my words. Not with my eyes. Because some ghosts don't deserve resurrection. And then my sister came weeks later. Less subtle. More desperate. She waited for me outside the center, just after dusk. Her eyes were tired. Her clothes worn. But her lips still shaped in excuses. I didn't know, she said. I was young. I was used to. But I didn't reply. I looked at her. Not with hatred, but with the kind of cold clarity that comes only after the fire has burned everything down. I hope you find peace, I said. Then I turned away. Because peace isn't something I owe anyone. Especially not the ones who shattered mine.
I didn't need them to say sorry.
I didn't need them to explain. I had already built something bigger than apology. A life they could never steal. A home they could never enter. A name they could never carry. Because the house I built with my own hands? It doesn't have space for ghosts. Only light. Only truth. Only me. They knocked on a Sunday. Not together. Not loud. Just a soft, uncertain tap. At the door I built with my own hands. I didn't flinch. I didn't peer through the curtain or lean against the wall. I stayed seated, cross-legged on the hardwood, surrounded by warmth, books, laughter. A life that owed them nothing. They knocked again. Twice this time. Still gentle. Like guilt had aged them into hesitation. I knew who it was before the sound even came. There's a tone in blood, a certain frequency that echoes through wood. And yet, I felt no tremble in my chest. No rage. No sorrow. Not even curiosity. Only calm. Like the sea after a storm that forgot how to speak. My children were upstairs.
My husband in the garden.
The house was alive, but the past could not enter. They knocked a third time, then waited. And finally, they left. They left a letter. Folded carefully. Placed just beyond the welcome mat. No name on the front. Just blank white paper. I waited 3 days before touching it. Not out of fear, but because nothing inside it could change my story. Still, on the 4th morning, I read it. We didn't know. We thought you were strong enough. We were desperate. You had so much. We didn't think it would break you. There it was. Not an apology. A justification dressed as mourning. A confession wrapped in trembling ink. Not once did it say sorry. Not once did it ask what it cost me. Only what they lost. When I walked away, they wrote of shame. Not guilt. Of silence. But not of sorrow. Of consequences. Not change. I folded the paper again. Pressed it between pages of an old notebook I'd written in when I first left them. And I left it there, buried between the woman I was and the woman I became. Years passed. I never wrote back, never spoke their names. Not out of spite, but because silence was the last gift I gave myself. Some legacies are not written in blood. They are written in boundaries. I raised my children without the weight of betrayal in my voice. They grew up knowing joy didn't come from duty, but choice. When people asked about my mother, my sister, I would simply say, they live in a chapter I've already closed, because not every story needs a reunion. Not every ending needs healing. Some just need stillness. And when I walk through the life I built, this house,
This garden, this peace. I do so, with no shadows behind me. They knocked, but I didn't answer, because I was no longer theirs to find.